This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your top stories. Boris Johnson resigns as British Prime Minister, saying the will of the Conservative Party is clear.
Ukraine sends its best wishes, but many in Brussels say good riddance. Here in The Cube, we'll look at the European reaction to Johnson's resignation.
The French government presents a €25 billion package aimed at easing the burden of inflation on households. And enshrining the right to choose in European law, MEPs call for the right to safe and legal abortion to be added to the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. I'm Helena Humphrey, glad you could join me. Well, it has been a momentous day in the UK. Boris Johnson has resigned as Conservative Party leader, but he says that he will remain as Prime Minister until a successor is chosen. After 2 days of turmoil and key cabinet resignations, Johnson defiantly refused to leave office. But as those departures piled up and party support disappeared, Johnson at last bowed to the pressure, announcing his decision this morning outside of Number 10. Johnson was keen to set out what he believed to be his key achievements during his time in office.
I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine.
Well, let's go straight over to London then, where we can bring in our reporter, Vincent McAviney. Vinny, good to see you. After days of speculation, we are finally here. Boris Johnson has said that he's going, but he was definitely reluctant to do so. So what do you think was the deciding factor here for him?
Incredibly reluctant to go, and that's a slightly strange resignation speech. Boris Johnson didn't even acknowledge the reasons that he was being forced out, let alone apologise for them. Very much doing the habit of a lifetime, blaming those around him, saying it was the collective will of the Conservative Party, that it was Darwinist, that they wanted him to go, despite having received this huge mandate that he's kept going on about from voters back in 2019. So he very much was not pinning the blame on himself. It is, though, the fact that this morning, after around 50 members of his government had resigned, it continued at the highest level. He lost his Northern Ireland secretary, his education secretary, who'd only been in the post less than 24 hours. Then the killer blow, Nadeem Zahawi, the man that he'd only just promoted up to Chancellor, the number 2 man in the British government, had threatened to go if he didn't resign. So ultimately, Boris Johnson was not able to have a functioning government. It is believed that his wife, Carrie Johnson, and his close advisor, Guto Hari, his communications advisor, had to have a word with him this morning and say, the jig is up, you have to go. But there are real concerns amongst MPs that the timeline the Prime Minister wants, which would see him staying in office until October. He has he's appointed now members to those empty cabinet spots, not reappointed those who have quit. There's a worry amongst Conservative MPs that the Prime Minister actually might try to reverse this, try and slip out of it somehow, that there could be some kind of crisis involving Ukraine, and that he'll try to stick with it. He said that next week, Boris Johnson, he said he will get the announcement on the timetable for the election to replace him. But it has alarmed Sir John Major, the former Prime Minister of this country, a Conservative in the 1990s, who has written to the 1922 committee, which is the backbench committee which runs the party, saying that the Prime Minister's timeline is simply not acceptable, that he shouldn't be able to make those big decisions we think he wants to make about things like tax policy in the coming months as a lame duck Prime Minister. So I think we might see in the next few days a shifting tide which tries to remove Boris Johnson much quicker than he wants.
So the leadership race is now afoot. Who are the front runners right now?
Well, there are, we think, around 10 candidates who want to run. The current front runners, the current Chancellor, been in the post only almost 2 days, Nadeem Zahawi. He is definitely one to watch. He was the former Education Secretary. He was also in charge of rolling out the vaccine. He has an interesting backstory. He is a refugee from Iraq. You also have the likes of Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, who resigned, starting all of this. Penny Mordaunt, another name. She was Development Minister, someone that's been talked about as well. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, currently flying back from the G20 in Indonesia. You also get some smaller names like Suella Braverman, the Attorney General. So we are going to get, I think, around 10 initially. 2 people, though, that have ruled themselves out. Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, he says that he will not run. And Michael Gove as well, someone who previously ran for the leadership. He is, of course, fired by Boris Johnson last night, rather unceremoniously. He has said that he will not be running this time around.
All right, our reporter there, Vincent McAviney, bringing us the latest from London. Vinny, good to talk to you on this momentous day. Well, our team in the Cube have been looking at all the reaction to Boris Johnson's resignation, and there have been some positive words from Ukrainian officials.
Indeed, Helena, take a look at this tweet from Anton Gerashenko. He's an advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. He said that, Boris Johnson, you are a true friend of Ukraine, and we are very grateful for your stance against Russia and your support for Kyiv. Contrast that to the words coming out of the Kremlin. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov telling reporters that Russia is hoping that someday Great Britain will have leaders in power who are more professional when it comes to making decisions through dialogue. Clearly, the next UK Prime Minister will have a lot on their agenda when it comes to the Ukraine war. But Boris Johnson's premiership most recently has been marked by his potential unilateral action to overturn the Northern Ireland Protocol. And within Brussels, there are many people who are suggesting that this resignation is a turning point, a new page. The Irish Taoiseach Micheál Martin releasing a lengthy statement in which he acknowledged that Boris Johnson has endured a challenging leadership period. But he went on to say that tensions between the Irish and British government have become very high, and that it is now more important than ever to ensure that the next UK government backs off from any unilateral action, whether that be on the Northern Ireland Protocol, but also on the UK's previous legacy and on human rights. Those words were also echoed on Twitter by Michel Barnier, the former EU Brexit negotiator, who described this as a new page, saying that he hoped that European relations with the UK could now be more respectful of commitments that had been made. And the very prominent MEP Guy Verhofstadt, the former Belgian Prime Minister, went even further, saying on Twitter that Boris Johnson's reign has ended in disgrace, just like Donald Trump. Guy Verhofstadt expressing hope that his resignation could now be the end of, in his words, transatlantic European populism. And I'm just going to end on the words of, or in fact the pictures of, the former Italian Premier Enrico Letta, who just tweeted one image, the front page of The Economist magazine, the image of Boris Johnson when he was the Mayor of London, and the caption, "Clownful Britain after Boris." So, Helena, some very mixed words coming out of Brussels, some of hope for the future, some of relief at Boris Johnson's resignation. But I think it is telling that there are very few European leaders who have actually released a statement in the last few hours.
All right, Matthew, thanks very much. As you say, one of the most enduring images there of Boris Johnson. Let's go from that European reaction then back to the UK. And for more analysis on what all of this means and how the next weeks and months unfold, we can bring in Tim Durrant now, who is the Associate Director at the Institute for Government. Good evening to you, Tim. Great to have you with us this evening.
Hi.
I think it's fair to say there are a lot of questions right now. Boris Johnson has indicated he wants to remain until the autumn. The question is, will his party let him?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, he's set out, he clearly expects to stay as a kind of caretaker prime minister until the next leader of the Conservatives is chosen. We've seen online some MPs saying that they don't think that's good enough. They think he should be gone immediately. But then that opens a whole new set of questions. There needs to be a prime minister. So if you want him to leave straight away, who do you put in his place? In the UK, we don't have a kind of interim or caretaker position. If you are Prime Minister, you are Prime Minister. You have all of the powers and responsibilities that go with that post. So it would be untested if they try to put someone in. And the question is as well, who would that be? We have the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, who has ruled himself out of standing for the leadership. But for him to become any kind of interim Prime Minister, that would require the party to support him. And it's not clear that they're in that place. So, yes, there are some people who want Johnson to leave immediately, but actually that makes things a lot more complicated. It seems he is committed to being a kind of hands-off or sort of a more distant, perhaps, Prime Minister in the remainder of his time, so that he can be a more sort of neutral caretaker while the party works out who it wants to take over.
Right.
And I think it's probably more likely.
Tim, I want to ask you this then, because, I mean, you talk about untested options, but essentially we really are in uncharted territory here. And one of the ideas being floated right now is whether the 1922 committee could actually truncate the leadership contest, could speed things along more quickly. I mean, could that be an option, do you think?
Absolutely. So the 1922 committee is the grouping of conservative backbenchers, and they can set the rules for the leadership contest however they want. They are going to do that next week. I think there is a sense that people want to move quickly. We've got about 3 weeks left before Parliament breaks for summer recess, and so the expectation is that there are 2 stages to the leadership process. The first one is MPs declare, and that list is whistled down to a final 2. And then the second stage, those final 2 are voted on by the members of the party. I think the party wants to resolve that first stage before Parliament breaks for recess, so by the end of July. That's very quick. You know, that we know that there might be a dozen or more candidates running. Lots of names have been bandied around. Lots of people are sort of apparently starting their campaigns for leader. And so the process of getting that big list down to a final 2 is going to take a lot of time.
I mean, you mentioned 3 weeks, you say it's pretty quick, but at the same time, it's a very long time when the UK is going through such a tumultuous period. And I just wonder if there continues to be this tussle, which we could potentially see, is there the risk that there is even more chaos, constitutional crisis for the UK ahead?
There's always that risk, I think. You know, never say never, particularly in the UK over the last few years. At the same time, I actually think we're probably through the worst of the tumult now. I think, you know, the resignations over the last 48 hours, the sense that maybe the Prime Minister was going to try and cling on, that all kind of contributed to this sense of chaos and uncertainty. But actually, now there is at least a roadmap. We know what is going to happen. Yes, of course, things could change. But I think the fact that the Prime Minister set out that, you know, the committee are going to set out the timetable for the election next week, and he's going to stick to that, and then it will be up to them to make that happen as quickly as they want it to. I think that is going to give people some certainty that things are moving as they should.
All right, Tim Durrant from the Institute of Government. Great to have your insights. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Well, ahead, as the relentless Russian offensive continues in the Donbass, we'll have the latest from the war in Ukraine with our correspondent. That's ahead. Well, as we've been hearing, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stepped down, and in his resignation speech, Johnson referenced his support for Ukraine as one of his government's most significant achievements. Well, Euronews' Sasha Vakulina joins me now to discuss how his departure could impact the country's war effort. Sasha, good to see you. Are there concerns in Ukraine right now that Boris Johnson leaving could see a drop-off in support from the UK?
I would say there are massive concerns on that, although this afternoon we have heard so many messages from Ukrainian officials and from President Zelensky himself thanking Boris Johnson and regretting the fact that he is now that he resigned. What happened today and this afternoon? Interestingly, not only the officials in Ukraine reacted this way, there has been lots of reaction by Ukrainians on social media because of the way Boris Johnson supported Ukraine from the very early days. He was the first Western leader to come to Kyiv to visit the capital. He walked down those streets in central Kyiv. He was among the first ones to actually support with weapons and also to talk to other Western allies to provide weapons to Ukraine. So there is a very special feeling about Boris Johnson in Ukraine. Also, you know, when you look at his Instagram handle, he goes with Boris Johnson UK. Ukrainians sort of transformed it and said this is Boris Johnson nuke, making it sound very Ukrainian. There is this special feeling, but we have to understand that for Ukrainians, it's been very dramatic situation. They have been so focused on the war raging all over their country that they did not probably look that much into what's been happening with Boris Johnson and the UK.
Right, understandably, of course. But meanwhile, on the ground in Ukraine, I mean, it is noteworthy today that we've got the first day that Russia hasn't reported any territorial gains there. Tell us more about that.
Well, it looks like Russian troops are now on the so-called operational pause. This has been now confirmed also by the Institute for the Study of War, by the think tank. This happened right after the fall of the Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. What happens, it means that they just don't stop fighting altogether, but they're not trying to make any territorial gains. They're trying to let those troops rest and also resupply, regroup somehow, but the fighting still continues all the front line in Ukraine, and also the shelling continues. And this afternoon we have seen Kramatorsk and Kharkiv again being shelled.
All right, Sasha Vakulina there bringing us the latest. Sasha, as ever, great to have your insights. Thank you. Well, the French government has announced a new round of economic measures aimed at curbing the effects of inflation. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said that the €25 billion package is targeted and temporary and includes public sector pay rises and fuel rebates for drivers. Well, our international correspondent Annelise Borges is standing by in Paris. We can cross straight to her now. Annelise, the finance minister said that the aim of this package essentially was to help workers. I mean, how much help do they need? And of course, crucially, will this be enough?
Well, purchasing power was the top concern, according to the polls, for French voters throughout this very busy electoral year. Inflation is at 5.8%, more than double the same rate last year here in France. Several sectors of the economy have been affected, so workers do need the help. According to the government, then, there will be a wide range of measures, according to the French government spokesperson, that will be their priority, tackling the rising costs of living here in this country. That wide set of measures include a 4% increase in pension benefits, a 3.5% increase in civil servant pay, but also other tax cuts and food vouchers and caps on prices. The government also announced that gas will the price of gas will not increase until the end of the year. They will also continue to extend a state-funded rebate on fuel prices, and people, for example, who can prove they travel long distances for work, they will continue receiving benefits from the government. The total cost of this package, according to Bruno Le Maire, will stay around 20 billion euros. That is a significant amount. But Bruno Le Maire says, despite the fact that public spending here in France is at a danger level, they can afford to do this because of an increase in tax revenue from last year. This major package is the first proposed bill put forward by this new administration since the re-election of Emmanuel Macron, and since Emmanuel Macron lost an outright majority in legislative elections last month. It's going to be very interesting to see just how this bill is received, debated and voted in the National Assembly. Members of Emmanuel Macron's groups are confident that they can pull this through. I spoke to a member of his party earlier today who told me he's confident that his colleagues will either support or at least abstain and not block this text. He told me that they understand the urgency of the matter and just how important these measures are to the French.
Well, we shall see. Annelise Borges there reporting from Paris. Annelise, thanks a lot. Well, over the border to Italy now, where the long-awaited trial opened over the collapse of a bridge in Genoa in 2018, which killed 43 people. A large section of the Morandi Bridge broke off during a storm, sending dozens of vehicles plummeting to the riverbed below. 59 defendants are accused of manslaughter and negligence, among other charges. The trial's been adjourned for the summer, and it's expected to restart in September. Well, Euronews correspondent Giorgia Orlandi has been following the story and sent us this report.
The collapse of the bridge killed 43 people exactly 4 years ago. Relatives of the victims have been waiting for today for quite some time, and it is remembered as one of the worst tragedies in Italian history. Among the people who stand trial, there's also the former head of the Atlantia Group, now Autostrade per l'Italia, which controls nearly half of Italy's motorway network, that has been accused of failing to maintain that bridge. Used to belong to that group. There are also several officials from another company that was in charge of inspections on the bridge, and several transport ministry officials have been added to that list as well. The judge who ordered these people to stand trial also ordered these companies to pay 29 million euros to the Italian state. The charges include manslaughter, willful disaster and negligence. And we know as well that in a report that was published last year on the investigation, prosecutors highlighted incomplete and inadequate inspection on that bridge. We know as well that another 200 people are expected to come forward today requesting compensation following the tragedy, bringing the overall amount of people who've requested compensation between individuals and companies to 500. It's going to be a long trial. It's going to take perhaps months, if not years, before a verdict can be reached. Giorgia Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
Members of the European Parliament have called for the right to a safe and legal abortion to be included in the bloc's Charter of Fundamental Rights. Approving the resolution, they said that women's rights are inalienable and cannot be watered down. Ada Sanchez-Alonso has more.
The European Parliament has approved the resolution strongly condemning the deterioration of sexual and reproductive health and rights of women in the United States. In June, the US Supreme Court overturned a law that granted the right to abortion nationwide. Now the legislation will depend on each state, with the more conservative ones imposing bans or strong restrictions.
I felt absolutely shocked when I heard about the plans to basically roll back on fundamental rights, especially as a woman myself. I believe that our rights, our bodies are our choice. So I think that we have to do everything we can to fight back and to resist these kind of attacks.
With 324 votes in favour and 155 against, the approved resolution includes a call to add the right to abortion in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. MEPs think there are also worrying signals in the EU.
There are some countries in Europe that don't guarantee the health and reproductive in women in Europe. Poland, we don't know what will happen in other countries, but in any case, what is important is guarantee that we can include the sexual and reproductive health in the Fundamental Rights Charter in the European Union to guarantee that we are speaking about the human rights.
In the EU, Malta is the only country with a ban on abortion. Poland also has highly restrictive laws. The Parliament urges member states to ensure access to safe, legal and free abortion services and prenatal and maternal healthcare services. Aida Sanchez-Alonso, Euronews, Brussels.